Hi, it's Ray from Pro Shaper Workshop, and as you can see, we're in a boat, not a car. You saw the earlier videos we did on the Century Resorter. We got that all blown apart, and it looks like the bottom's really bad. It's probably worse than I figured, but I'm a sucker for that boat, and I says, well, that's going to be not a short-term project, but a long-term project. So we're going to pull it in the shop and really pull the bottom all apart. But in the meantime, when I bought that Resorter, which was very little money, basically just a time to go get it, and that seems to be a phenomenon out there on Facebook Marketplace. A lot of boats today, used boats that are still got a lot of life left in them, are basically being given away for very little money. So when I got back from picking up that Resorter, I looked on Marketplace, and 6 miles from my shop, there's a little lake there, and this boat was for sale, and it was purchased by somebody that had intent of fixing it up and stuff, and they didn't do anything. And it's been sitting outside in the weather since 2015. I believe that was the last year it was registered. And my experience with boats goes back to the 60s and well, right to the 1970. And after that, I've had like a 50-year hiatus with boats and being on the lake I grew up on, Lake Quinsigamond in Shrewsbury, Mass. And I've got a hankering to, after 50 years, to get back on the lake, maybe have a couple good vacation days next summer. So the Century is not going to let me get to the lake probably next summer because there's a lot of work there. So I saw this boat on Facebook Marketplace. It's a 1987 Wellcraft. I think it's a 19-footer, and it's got a little small cabin in the front. Mark is filming from the cabin, and it's very a common problem. Is what happens is some mechanical problem might happen to the motor or whatever, and then people who paid really good money for this boat, I can't imagine what it was bought for new, and it's a really nice boat, but they might have had a motor problem. In this case here, we found out the fuel pump was bad. So and it turns out the carburetor was all plugged up on it too. But we primed it with a little gas and the motor started right up, but we couldn't keep it running. So we're rebuilding the carburetor. We've got a new fuel pump. And it sounded like the motor didn't have any major problems. There was no knocks or anything apparent. So, and it didn't appear to be any cracks in the block or anything. So I think we're okay on the motor. We've yet to prove that out. But what I discovered was that this is a very common problem. Is what happens is people park their boat in the backyard, and they might have a top on it, but after a year or two the top rots or whatever, and the water starts collecting inside, and it builds up in the bilge if they didn't pull the plug, and a lot of them don't even pull the bilge plug. And what happens is all this plywood floor structure that's put in at the factory. The hull is all fiberglass on this boat, which is waterproof and can't rot or anything. But they put this plywood structure in here to support the floor, and it adds a little strength to the bottom. But it's not a significant strength factor for the bottom. I think you could probably drive this boat no problem without any of this floor structure here. And they make the floor structure with plywood, and then they encapsulate it in fiberglass, but they really don't do too good of a job of it. So the fiberglass is really thin. And then they basically make all these little cells, and then they inject foam into them and kind of fill them. Well, the intent, I suppose, is to fill it entirely, but only, as you can see, that one that's exposed to the Mark's left, it's not entirely filled up. And what does that foam do? Well, it adds a flotation element to the boat. So if the boat fills with water totally, it might not really sink. I don't know whether that foam's enough to keep it floating or what. But it adds soundproofing also. So flotation, soundproofing, and also gives some support to the floor system. And the floor system was just plywood. They mount the fuel tank right in the middle, but they don't have any facility for access to the fuel tank. This is all totally enclosed in plywood, and then they put indoor-outdoor carpet, which is glued on top over everything. So what happens is the water permeates the carpet and the plywood flooring and eventually builds up in the bilge and starts rotting. Somehow it gets into the superstructure of the floor and starts rotting the stuff all out. So to a lot of people, this is a really expensive project and they can't figure out how to do it or whatever. So it just goes from bad to worse. And then the boat is a problem because you just, like an old car, if it's not a collectible car of some sort, it's still worth a couple $100 in scrap value. But boats, the only way you can dispose of them, you got to cut them up with chainsaws. So it's a lot of work, so that's why people are just giving these boats away. But there's really nothing wrong with the boat. If the motor needs to be rebuilt, that's not really a big deal. It's got the Merc Cruiser 165 horse, 4-cylinder in it with the Merc Cruiser outdrive. And they've made, hundreds of thousands of those, I bet, over the years. So there's parts available for all that stuff. The interior gets trashed too. That's all vinyl. And then we do at the shop here, we have a walking foot machine. So, and I've done a lot of sewing. One of my employees can sew, so we can refinish all the interior of the boat with a couple big rolls of vinyl that we'll buy, and it'll look like $1 million. And the motor will straighten out, and any other little detail. The fiberglass is a gel coat. The gel coat creates the color because it's got a dye in it. And we'll take that gel coat's about 1/16 of an inch thick, so we can sand this with like 1200 or 1500 sandpaper, and then polish it with a buffer, and the paint will come out beautiful. Put some wax on it. It's got a lot of aluminum trim. We'll clean that all up. And there was a lot of hardware. There was China source that was made out of white metal, and it kind of just crumbled, so we'll have to replace a bunch of that. We'll put back the either stainless or brass chrome-plated trim on it. And for the floor system, why the factory doesn't do it other than maybe planned obsolescence, I see that what I'm going to do to fix it is I'll do like a concrete form deal where I'll make some metal forms, and one on either side with a release agent, and these main cross members here that you see that are all rotted, we'll take and fiberglass those. We'll put resin in, and then some cloth and some resin and maybe some stainless steel wire or something to really strengthen it like reinforced concrete is strengthened. And we'll have the cross members really, really strong, and then we'll make the fore to aft pieces here for strength, and it'll add strength to the bottom. It'll be totally waterproof. It can't rot. It'll be all fiberglass content. And then instead of injecting the foam, which only did a little section of these, after we get the superstructure all done again, we'll cut foam to fit each one of these cells with a bandsaw, and that'll give the nice sound deadening and the flotation and also support to the floor. And the floor, I was thinking we use a non-rotting material, and I think it's Trex that they use on outdoor decking, which is some kind of plastic or whatever. It's non-rotting. I'll put that in here and then cover it with a nice indoor-outdoor carpet that all has to have UV protection, anything you put in here. So as you can see, Mark has started cutting the floor out, and we're using one of these little multi-tools that cut with this little vibration action, and we just marked it off with tape, and Mark has been cutting these cells open and removing the foam. He's got this side done, and later on today he's going to finish that side. And it didn't take long. It was only like about an hour to do this and maybe an hour to do that. And then there's another multi-tool cutter with a little round head on it, which allows you to go right to the surface, and we'll cut all this superstructure out. And then it's just a matter of glassing in the new superstructure, and we're on our way to the lake, hopefully next summer. I took a vacation in 1985. I think I'm due for a couple days off sometime. Hopefully next summer. If you're around, we'll give you a ride in the boat. It's Ray from ProShaper Workshop. Thanks for watching.